Hello, everybody. Once again, this is Fred Wamko coming to you from our studios in Chicago with another edition of Bold Talk on Allen TV. As usual, I'd like to say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are around the world. Folks, the wheel keeps spinning around Africa. At my last broadcast, we were focusing on the coup in Niger. Now we just had, in the last 36 hours, we had a coup in Gabon. And the political landscape in West Africa is shaking. The question now becomes, who can it be next? I don't know who it could be next, but I know what the sentiments in West Africa, I know which way they lean. And I must preempt what I'm saying by clarifying that to the best of my knowledge, most West Africans, if not all, like the democratic system of governance. At my last check, most West Africans are against military rule. But we must be fooling ourselves, considering the level of corruption among our so-called leaders, mostly who stole their way into office, with the level of corruption and human rights abuse going on. We will be fooling ourselves if we say that Africans are not celebrating these coups that have been going on, especially the last one in Gabon. It's important to stress to America, France, and the European Union especially to be careful how they tread in this matter, because Africa is getting ready to explode. West Africa is getting ready to explode. In the last 3 elections in Nigeria, every one of them has been questionable, but the last 2, 2019 and 2023, have been particularly questionable, and 2023 has become the king of the questionable elections in the entire continent of Africa, if not the entire world. Nigeria has never seen such gross rigging go on unchecked in an election. At what point are Nigerians going to stop pretending that this is normal? At what point are we going to stop allowing the media, especially the public media, and the panels they bring on those media, spin propaganda and lies and sell it to Nigerians and sell it to Africans as the way things should be? Folks, Nigeria is sick and we need to steer the ship right. There was overwhelming evidence at the tribunal for even Stevie Wonder not to wonder about the result of what the tribunal would do with that evidence, and for Ray Charles, who was a blind man, to see that the evidence was overwhelming and clear. When are Nigerians going to wake up between now and September 16th, when the tribunal plans to bring out whatever the result they have? But if they bring up a cooked up result, when are we going to decide that enough is enough? Bola Ahmed Tinubu has forged every document he has ever used in his life, starting at childbirth. Bola Ahmed Tinubu has bribed everybody in sight to achieve anything he has ever achieved in life. Without forgeries and bribes, Bola Ahmed Tinubu is nobody. Bola Ahmed Tinubu has been indicted for drugs in America, major drug dealing, not selling nickel and dime bags. Bola Ahmed Tinubu has questions to answer about the taxing process in Lagos and how the money could be diverted to his personal funds. When are we going to address Bola Ahmed Tinubu's direct involvement in the maiming of voters in Lagos and killing of some and rigging of elections in Lagos, especially at the gubernatorial level? When are we going to address all those things? And when are we going to understand that we can't sit around and be waiting for America or France or European Union to do what we need to do for ourselves? Their method of doing things could be their method of doing things, and it works for them. If it's not working for us, we need to do things our own way, but do it peacefully. We need to occupy the streets of Nigeria and extend that occupation to our African brothers and sisters, and occupy the streets and hamlets of Africa until the crooks that stole their ways into office, who are the reason we're having all these military coups that are going to disrupt our democratic process, and we're welcoming it. We have to occupy the streets and say that enough is enough. And we have enough Africans in America to start with America. The Democratic Party in the past has been good enough to Africans, but the Democratic Party in the past, just like the Republican Party and the doctrine they follow in their African policies, have been very bad for Africa, and it's time for it to change. And that change can start with Africans in America. And the process is clear, and I'll lay it out. You don't have to agree with me, but the process is clear. If Africans organize in America, we know what we need to do with the Democratic Party to make them start a process. It may not be immediate, but we want to see a process that starts to change our dilemma in Africa and their support of these puppets they plant in our presidential villas across Africa. It doesn't matter to America. But I take that back. It matters to America, and it should matter to Americans, because now I'm talking to Africans in America. There are enough Africans in America, if we organize, to disrupt the political landscape of America. If we organize. And that disruption is going to hit the Democratic Party the hardest. And why not? My detractors are going to say, why would you want to do something to hurt the Democratic Party, considering that they've done so much for human rights and for Africans included and all that? And I say, yes. I'm not going to undermine what the Democrats have done, the Democratic Party has done for human rights. But I'll be remiss if I don't bring to the forefront what this current Democratic Party and the last one who left office, that was led by a fellow black person, I'll be remiss if I don't bring to the forefront the damages they caused in Nigeria that brought Buhari to power, and the damage they are going to do in Nigeria if we let them, by supporting Bola Ahmed Tinubu as the man they are going to use to fight these coups going on in Africa. Why would we join America to fight a war that benefits America and its selfish interest in Africa? Let me give you a little breakdown of where I'm going with this. I wouldn't like to hurt the Democratic Party. I know the things they've done for minorities, including Africans. But if you feed me breakfast and starve me for lunch and dinner, intentionally, are you really feeding me? Are you feeding me enough to go out and work and slave for you while you don't give a damn about me after I've slaved for you? Have you ever thought about the United States of Africa? Okay, I know many are like, United States of Africa, what are you talking about? Well, that's a nice soundbite. While it may be a little too late for United States of Africa in terms of logistics and coordination and all that, I think we still have an opportunity for starting to think about the United Regions of Africa, or United Subregions of Africa. We're going to build them in a way that they have teeth to bite. Not right now where you have ECOWAS that is just a rubber stamp. For the most part, it's been a rubber stamp of Nigeria. How can a country where corruption rules be the one that rubber stamps a regional organization? And you expect anything good out of that organization? It's not going to happen. And it brings me to the most critical thing about this edition: Africa's youth. Africa's youth need to organize. It's time to occupy Africa with civil disobedience from coast to coast. Nothing comes easy. Lives may get lost, but lives are getting lost because of corruption and bad management and insecurity. In Igbo language, they say, "Nkeye me chinya metata." In Yoruba language, they say, "Bole yako ya, bole dogun ko dogun." Listen to some sound bites from Professor Lumumba.
And we are not for 1 minute saying that we will shut ourselves out from the rest of the world. What we are saying is that we must define how we engage with the whole world. And we are saying that as individual countries, we are weak, and the rest of the world wants to operate and to deal with us in our weak state. The United States of America are dealing with Rwanda on second-hand clothing. Rwanda cannot resist them. Burundi cannot. Kenya cannot. Uganda cannot. But if we are East Africa with a population of 300 million, we can. If we are SADC, we can. If we are ECOWAS, we can. So this is what we are saying. And we are saying further that going forward, we must also recognize our internal weaknesses. And what is our weaknesses? Chinua Achebe said it very well. The problem of Africa is simply and squarely one of political leadership. The rank of many political leaders in Africa are thieves. Let's call them by their name. They are thieves. They are individuals who are not interested in the interest of this country. And as long as we continue electing such individuals into positions of power across Africa, they are going to be manipulated. What then is the responsibility of the citizenry? The responsibility of the citizenry is to make demands.
And then create a coordinating body to ensure that regardless of what the regions are doing individually, that when it comes to African policy and military policy and those kind of things that we need a force to be effective with, that it's coordinated between the four regions so that everybody knows what everybody is doing. And when we are negotiating with whoever, we're not shutting them out. But when we are negotiating with whoever wants to do business with us, we are negotiating in the interest of the entire continent. This is not too much to ask. But realistically, it starts with Africa's youth. It's all about Africa's youth. I'm going to tie this episode to an old episode I did, bring in sound bites from there so that you could see that these are not concepts I came up with overnight. These are concepts and ideas I've always espoused. The future of Africa is in our youth. Our youth are the ones who are taking the brunt of the bad decisions that we in Africa have made for generations. And unfortunately, the youth are also the most easily brainwashable. And many of the selfish things that are going on in Africa today, the youth are the ones who are being used to accomplish these things. If you look at all the different countries where we have conflict, where we have agitation, and I'll always use Nigeria for my prime example because I'm Nigerian, the youth are the ones who are brainwashed first to get involved in these agitations. I'm not here to criticize the agitating. I'm only here to say that while the agitations are justified, where the agitations lead us may not be the best option for Africa. Africa today and for many decades has been dealing with what I call the recolonization of Africa. The shame is that Africa is not being recolonized by Europeans or by Chinese or by Russians. Africa is actually being recolonized by African leaders. When the Europeans came and colonized us, they wanted to exploit our resources. Today, the exploitation of our resources is not necessarily done by Europeans and foreigners. They are playing a role in it, but it's done by our elite. Much of this agitation that is going on, the beneficiaries are going to be the elite of Africa. The ones who will lose the most are going to be the youth of Africa, because the African youth are getting educated, they are coming out in mass numbers with degrees, but there are no jobs for them. When intelligent people don't have jobs, their brains, which is very active, become warehouses and workshops for the devil. Because the youth, one, are angry, the youth are jobless, and the youth are taking out their anger on everything they see. But that's not the right way to go, because these youth are very intelligent. We need to put the youth in a position where they can use their intelligence to take Africa to the next generation. Africa is not going to get to the next plateau with Africa splitting into different splinter groups. We want Biafra, we want Oduduwa. In South Africa, the whites have gone out to apply that they want to have their own country. In Mozambique, you have people trying to split up. In Somalia, they're splitting up. In Cameroon, they're splitting up. When you split up all these things, you go from 55 countries to maybe 100 countries. Where are the resources you're going to use to run 100 countries? It's time for us to start thinking boldly and thinking about the United States of Africa. Biafra cannot fight the United States. Your Dudua state cannot fight Britain. The splinter countries that you form out of Somalia are not going to be able to fight Russia. The splinter groups in Cameroon are not going to be able to fight China. All those countries that you're trying to fight are fighting us, even if they are not called that, but they're the united peoples of a large entity. When you have a large entity, you can build a large army. It comes with its problems. Managing the entity could be a problem, but if they're managing it, why can't we manage it? When you have a large entity, you can build a united economy that serves the people better. You can build a political system that can take care of the little units much better than the tiny country that cannot take care of its tiny population. We need to start seeing ourselves as one people. United, we can conquer. Divided, we can achieve nothing. I know that it's not what the agitation-minded people want to hear. I understand that. Believe me, in my own frustration, I really want Biafra. Because for so many years, we've been with Nigeria and Nigeria hasn't offered us anything. But I also know that I'm old enough to understand that as a very young person, when Nigeria had a semblance of a united country, a lot more things worked for Igbos, for Yorubas, for Hausas, for Fulanis, for Edos, for Efiks, and everybody. Let's stop being brainwashed by the people who are going to take our resources and benefit the most from it. Let's start building a continent where our youth will have limitless space to explore their potentials. I don't know about you, but almost every time when I'm in Nigeria, I find myself in a computer village in Lagos or Abuja or Enugu or Port Harcourt. And what our young people are doing in those computer villages will flabbergast you. And then when you start taking count of the background of these young people that are doing incredible things at the computer villages, you find that many of them barely finished high school. Not because they are not smart, but because they were too hungry to focus in high school, let alone university. Let's build a continent that can unleash our youth. Let's start thinking youth in everything we do. And to the youth, I'm saying this to you. Sometime in the 90s, Chukwuemeka Ojukwu visited Chicago and he spoke. It was during the Abacha administration in Nigeria, and I attended that event. I don't think I remember much of what he said, but I remember one thing. Because somebody asked him, all these people are getting old, including you. When are you guys going to step down so that the young people can take over? And he looked the guy straight in the face. And he told him, if you're waiting for people to step down from power, you are never going to get power. You have to wrestle power from them. Youth of Africa need to organize themselves. The youth of Africa need to stop being brainwashed by wealthy Africans and paid off. So it is your votes that's putting senile people in office. It is your votes that is putting 65 and 70 and 75 and 80-year-old people in office. They have nothing to offer you. No, I'm not undermining our older generation. They've paid their dues. They've done their time. They've done the best they can. It's time for them to become elder statesmen. It's time for our younger people to take over power. It's time for our younger people to become managing directors of banks, while our 80-year-old experienced retired bank directors advise them on how things are done. It's time for our younger people to become the majority of the ministers in the cabinets. It's time for our younger people to become the president, while they have an elder statesman that they go to when they need advice. If I have something to contribute to Africa, I could contribute from behind the scenes. My face doesn't have to show up on the headlines for me to contribute. But Africa's youth, Ghana's youth, Cameroon's youth, Kenya's youth, Uganda's youth, Mozambique's youth, South Africa's youth, Nigeria's youth. If you're 35 years old and you're 40 years old and you're 50 years old and you're pouting that you're deprived, then it's your fault. I understand that the opportunities have not been there for you. I understand that the doors have not been opened for you. But stop pouting. Organize. We should stop complaining about what Europe is doing to us. It's time to look in the mirror. When we collectively look in the mirror, Africa, we're going to find that our problems are staring at us. We are our problems. Europe is not our problems. In my lifetime, I've never seen Europeans come to Africa with guns to take our resources. Instead, I've seen our leaders welcome Europeans and their ships and their sailors who come in and load up their ships. And on their way out, we ask them, "Are you sure you don't have room to take more?" And they say, "No, this is enough for now. We'll be back when we need some more." And we're happy to shake their hands and say bye. Have a nice trip back. This has to stop. My heart bleeds for Africa. And ladies and gentlemen, on that note, I'd like to say thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Good night and God bless.
EFCC chairman still there for jail. Politician wey in the probe don enter for power. EFCC chairman still there for jail. Politician wey in the probe don enter for power. Ewo, EFCC chairman still there for jail. Politician wey in the probe don enter for power. Ewo, EFCC chairman still there for jail. Politician wey in the probe don enter for power. If you dey do government work, you no carry am for head, you. Maka one day aga bokwa gike na ma o. In another government, you hear why you one day more. Ebukwa ya nishi one day aga bogike na ma o. Ewo, EFCC chairman no dey for jail. Politician wey in the program enter for power.